Good to go, Jeff.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Calvin. I'm the contracting officer of the Mass Station. Dana Rosa, also with us, going to be helping present and field the Q&A. We're talking about today, and actually going to go off camera so you all can make sure you get the full effect of the content here. But we're talking today about RFO updates to the mass ordering procedures. Let me just get us started here. Okay. All right, so what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about two major sections in terms of the RFO as it relates to mass or FSS ordering procedures. We're going to highlight some key changes, and we're going to highlight some of the key features that were maintained through the RFO updates. So there was a rewrite of a lot of things, right? RFO did a whole lot of updating to simplify and streamline processes for procurement across the federal government, and that includes federal supply schedule ordering procedures. So some of the highlights in terms of how or what was the intent of rewriting those procedures, removing complexity and duplication, embracing flexibility and innovation, certainly, eliminating duplicative 8.4 guidance. So if you look at the graphic on the right, so the RFO FAR Part 8 is published on acquisition.gov. That section, the RFO section of the FAR now references GSAR 53871 for schedule ordering procedures. In addition to that, we have ordering content on GSA.gov. And those are all intended to be sort of complementary, not redundant, not obviously not to contradict or restrict what was intended to be done with the RFO. So to go back to some of the idea of this eliminating duplicative language, as an example, if we have a clause in the mass contract, there's no reason we need to restate the process outlined in that clause in the ordering procedures. So I'm just going to take a quick second here to give you an idea again. So supplementing those GSAR ordering procedures is the GSA.gov content. And I just want to show you real quick, and hopefully this comes through and you guys will tell me on our side if this isn't coming through, if you can't see the web page. But the web page here, so you can get to this web page. There's a number of GSA.gov/schedules, GSA.gov/mass. I think there's a couple more. If you just Google it, you can find it too. But this is the landing page. And if you recall, if you've been on this page before, there were more boxes of content here. So what we've been doing as a team is we took all of the mass ordering procedures on GSA.gov down as we updated them to align with the RFO procedures, and we're putting them back up sort of block by block as we're vetting them and making sure they're all good to go. So the three that are up, and actually this, I believe this one, yeah, the overview block just came up, I think, last Friday. So we expect to possibly have some more coming up this week. So you'll continue to see more boxes here of the content that you would have previously seen, but it'll be updated to align with the RFO. And then sort of one more, again, if you go back to this graphic, so one more block or what's included here in this GSA.gov ordering content is our engagement with customers, which we intend to do through a YouTube playlist. So there's going to be an additional bullet coming soon on this page. It's going to give you a link to our YouTube playlist that will have training modules similar to this, but going into, so that we'll have the overview, probably a version of this training as a YouTube video listed there. But we'll also have some additional videos specific to other content, such as OLMs or CTAs, set-asides, those kinds of things. So you'll see more content coming up as we go. As the content comes up on the web page, again, we'll have YouTube playlists or YouTube videos coming up in that playlist. In addition to that, just to kind of complete the loop there in terms of how we're engaging with customer agencies, we also, through our partners in CASE, we are working on sort of an ongoing schedule of presenting that training. So that same training that you're going to see in the YouTube playlist, we're going to be scheduling sessions with customer agencies on a regular basis to present that training. And again, if you have questions or comments or anything, just please just drop them in the Q&A pod. All right, so let's talk about some of the key changes. So one of the key changes, or some of them, is to eliminate, we've eliminated some of those FAR 15 processes that was unclear or appeared to potentially apply to schedule buying. So there's clearly no evaluations plans, scoring, or competitive ranges now when you're utilizing schedules. Again, the language encourages these innovative approaches. There's a number of tools that OGP is putting out. The FAR Council also on, in partnership, I guess, with our OGP, putting out a number of tools on acquisition.gov. And we're certainly hoping that ordering agencies will be using those tools to develop innovative approaches for purchasing on schedules. Best value. So really, the language really aims to promote that concept of best value on schedules. So the idea that it's not always, doesn't always make sense to establish or procure the lowest cost alternative, right? Because that concept of best value is important and ultimately could be in the best interest of the government. And you're not going to see any more of this these different paths for statement of work versus non-statement of work. So the separate supply and services paths for guidance are eliminated. Okay, some key changes for BPAs. You must clearly spell out the details of the BPA. So they really give some more, you could interpret this as maybe more prescriptive guidance in this area, but the intent here was to really ensure clarity and consistency across the board for agencies that are establishing BPA. Another change is it now requires an annual confirmation of best value for all BPAs en masse and talks about looking for additional price discount opportunities, ensuring that BPA procedures are being followed, and ensuring that that underlying mass contract is still valid for the BPA. And one of the things that eliminated was the required HCA approval of a single award BPA over $100 million. Okay, something that I think is getting quite a bit of attention is there's no longer specific open market item guidance in the ordering procedures. And that's really intentional because the idea and the hope is that these new procedures have established some significant flexibilities and new tools or expanded tools in terms of OLMs, in terms of utilization of other mass contracts. So for an industry partner to purchase off another mass contract to supplement an RU, that's been expanded. Previously, the FAR 51 deviation, if you're familiar, and also maintains the CTA flexibility as well. So the idea being, open market items should almost never be necessary. So the guidance does acknowledge that sometimes, in rare instances, you may need to include an open market item, or purchasing agency may need to purchase an open market item in conjunction with a mass order or a BPA. But again, really moving away from that concept and hoping that the new flexibilities would eliminate a lot of the need for that. So one of the big reasons, so we'll get into some of the key changes. So one of the big reasons we feel like that open market guidance is no longer going to be as necessary as the updates to the OLM. So the definition is really unchanged, I think, very similar to the original concept, right? So these are supplies and services added at the order level, not known at mass contract or BPA award. The sub-bullet there that talks about must be incidental and not the primary purpose of the order. So that replaces that 33% limitation. Now it's this concept of simply not the primary purpose of the order. So essentially expanding the volume of OLM supplies and services that can be represented on a given order. And this is not a change here, but the pricing is still, so the pricing needs to be evaluated by someone, right? It's not evaluated at the mass contractor BPA level because it wasn't awarded on there. So the ordering activity is still responsible for evaluating that pricing. Yeah, and again, no longer as a percentage limitation. We talked about that. It's now allowed on all order types, so no longer a restriction to T&M. So any order type can be can utilize OLM. The OLM still must be clearly identified, and ordering activities must follow the GSAM ordering procedures when acquiring OLM. So essentially, they have to do all those steps to ensure the price is fair and reasonable, and the authority reference for OLMs is listed there as well. Okay, so just talking about just kind of summarizing the benefits of OLMs, you know, again, increases flexibility. It's already done that, but I think the updated rules just improve the sort of breadth of that, reduces procurement and administrative burden because it's allowing you to supplement those orders again with items that you may not have previously understood you would need for that mass contract or BPA. Should eliminate duplicative IDIQs or open market buys, promotes competition, certainly, and maintains compliance with mass terms and FAR requirements. So it's still a contract item, so it still must comply with the mass contract terms. So does it have to be TAA compliant? Yes, the answer would be yes. So it's still allowing some flexibility while maintaining compliance with the mass contract terms. Okay, want to talk a little bit about this. So OLMs require award of the OLM SIN. So just if we can go back to, so we made a lot of changes in the mass solicitation to prepare for the RFO updates and the updated ordering procedures. Most of those changes to clauses and solicitation content were made and refreshed 30 in November of last year. The one piece that is already, we just announced it this week, Refresh 31, happening, scheduled to happen in February. And one of the big things we're doing there is to eliminate, so it's kind of that final piece of implementation of the RFO for mass. And that's, and that's to remove the subcategory limitations for OLMs. So right now, in the solicitation, we're still limiting OLMs to 60 identified subcategories. That limitation is going away, and it will be open to any mass contractor. So if you don't have the OLM SIN, you're a current contractor and you previously declined the mass mod to add it, or you didn't have a valid subcategory, so you just never got the option to add it, you will now have the mass mod's going to be pushed out to, and Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to push it out to any current contractor that does not have the OLM SIN will get the opportunity to accept the customized mass mod to add the OLM SIN.
That is correct. And it'll be a one-time opportunity to accept it.
And then the same process for new awards. So an offer comes in, you're awarded a new contract. Typically, the system would look and see if you had a valid subcategory. And then if you did, it would give you the option to add that OLM SIN. Subcategory limitations are going away. So every new offer, every new contract award will receive that mass mod, giving them the option to add the SIN. Okay, so again, the pricing set. So we talked about the pricing being set at the order level. Ordering activity, again, ensures fair and reasonable pricing. One thing just to, and actually we might talk about it in the, oh wait, there's a tips and tricks slide, I believe. But let's talk about OLMs and BPAs. OLMs can be added to the BPA if the mass contract includes the OLM SIN. Again, the items are within scope, general scope of the BPA. The items must not alter the primary purpose of the BPA. So similar just to mass orders themselves, that 33% limitation is no longer there. Okay, so things to be, so if you're for an OLM evaluation checklist, so things to be aware of the order for the ordering activity. Is the order being placed against an authorized mass contract? Has the contractor added the OLM SIN? The order or the BPA must be structured in a way that the OLMs are not the preponderance of the work or the primary purpose. It is allowable to add costs. So handling fees, for example, to OLMs, that's allowable, but they need to be applied correctly. We have some detailed FAQs that go through some of that. The ordering activity must make that fair and reasonable determination, and that's in line with FAR 15404. And then if travel costs are included, they have to be properly administered and in compliance with applicable regulations. Okay, another difference or another key change, contractor use of mass contracts. Some of you may be familiar with it as the previously FAR 51 deviation covered this. So by default, mass contractors may purchase from other mass contracts in response to an RFQ. I just would pause there and say, same thing with OLMs. By default, it's a flexibility you have in your toolbox to answer that RFQ. What I would strongly advise is that you, especially if there's no mention of either this process of purchasing from another mass contract or of OLMs in the RFQ, any of the documentation, I would engage with that ordering activity, ask the question, just kind of giving them the heads up that you're considering either utilizing the OLM SIN or purchasing through another contract to supplement your offer, your quote. Because I think some, frankly, some of the ordering activities just may not be real familiar with these processes. And then if they have questions, you should be able to just point them to the gsa.gov page and say, if there's, if they're not familiar with the OLM process, it's all outlined on gsa.gov. And also this process, again, of purchasing from other mass contracts. Ensures transparency and compliance with FAR and GSAM, verifies compliance with FAR clauses, including TAA, reduces supply chain risk. So really what we're talking about with those bullets are we meaning FAST and the vendor community have done the work of vetting this stuff and getting it on contract. So you utilizing those existing contracts, taking advantage of that work that we've all done, just makes a lot of sense. So expanding this flexibility, I think, is going to be really beneficial. And I think we just need to get everyone really comfortable with the process and make sure everyone's aware that it's available. I think is going to be our big task with this. And again, mass contracts, we already include that 52-208-90 clause in the mass solicitation. So mass contracts have that clause, and the GSAR ordering procedures specifically state that no authorization is necessary. So again, the ordering activity doesn't have to give you permission to go do it. By default, this is a flexibility you have. Again, best practice for sure. Giving the ordering activity a heads up as soon as possible too, right? As soon as the RFQ comes out, potentially give them the heads up. Hey, I'm going to use, one of my colleagues' mass contracts to supplement using this guidance over here, or just confirming that they're aware and they're okay with that. But again, by default, it is permissible. Okay, so this is going more into that contractor use of mass contracts, contractor requirements. You got to follow the ordering procedures if you're purchasing from one of your colleagues and supplementing your order with that. You got to maintain complete ordering files to support audit and compliance reviews. Your files must include competition documentation or limited sources justification, any applicable price reasonableness determinations, all quotes and award documents, and this is another one, no double reporting the sale or charging the IFF twice, right? So, and Dana, I know we went through this one. I'll make sure I have this one right. And so if I'm answering RFQ and I buy off of Dana's contract to supplement my quote, Dana will report that sale and remit the IFF because it's her contract sale. I would not report that sale as part of my contract sale. I would not remit IFF on that.
Yes, that is correct. And that's actually on the Mass Flexibilities GSA.gov page as well. It's spelled out how it works.
Thanks, Dean. Okay. Okay, so summarizing the new OLM rules and use of mass flexibilities. Again, use OLMs or other contractors long before considering any open market items. Hopefully, it really prevents that from being necessary in most cases. Again, using those existing contracts, the work we've done, it's going to be faster. It's going to be more compliant. We're going to have better coverage in terms of terms and conditions, compliance, scrim risk. And this last bullet here, so until Mass has added OLM to each SIN, actually that's OLM SIN to each contract or make it available to each contract. You can continue to use open market when required. So, and it's still there. It's still something that may be in rare cases necessary. But again, with the new rules, the new flexibilities, we're really hoping it's not common that it's necessary. Okay, ordering activities may restrict the use of OLMs and RFQ. Again, by default, it's allowable. They may state they don't want to deal with the OLMs. You may ask them the question, hey, I'd like to utilize my OLM SIN to supplement this RFQ. And they may say that's not okay. So just highlighting that, again, by default, it's allowable, but may restrict the use. So requesting pricing details with quotes is recommended to support price analysis. In fact, you can, as you push forward, say you're going to send an OLM item through your OLM SIN to supplement your quote, providing some supporting documentation to establish that that's a price that's sort of common and you've utilized in similar circumstances before is only going to help push that RFQ evaluation forward. And again, mass contracts do have that clause already in all of our contracts. That should really the intent is to allow the contractor to use mass and promote maximum competition. Okay, so, and actually I want to go back to, I don't remember what, because this actually came up at an event we had yesterday, but just want to highlight going back to that scenario where I'm answering an RFQ. Dana, my colleague, I want to, purchase something from her mass contract to supplement my quote. That is not a mandatory order, meaning Dana is not obligated to accept that order as if I were, a federal agency in which she would be obligated to accept the order. So in the event that you, for whatever reason, you feel like you want to decline that order, you're certainly permitted to do so. So not a mandatory order. So key features maintained. Again, the ability to set aside orders at the order level continues to exist. As many of you may be aware, we no longer have the small business set aside SINs in the program. We've pretty much completely transitioned away from those. They're no longer valid SINs because we have this feature at the order level and because we know there were a number of issues with those SINs. So just highlighting here that, again, setting aside at the order level, certainly still a flexibility. And also mass CTAs. So this is kind of going through the requirements. There's the process here really hasn't changed. The guidance largely hasn't changed that we have published on GSA.gov. I know we just went through the process of putting out an RFI and gathering information from customers and from industry partners in terms of fine tuning this process. So good news, in my mind, that we're able to keep all that good work, and this process largely is consistent beyond RFO. And again, just going into, this is just highlighting some of those CTA agreement requirements that need to be in writing: define roles, deliverables, invoicing, include agreement in the order file, reference that IFSS 40. But again, this should not be new. They are largely unchanged. Okay, and now we're kind of at the end here. But this gives you an idea of kind of the flow of information. It really follows kind of that graphic on the first or second slide, whatever it was. So on acquisition.gov, we have that RFO FAR parts, the RFO FAR parts, and listing which agencies have process deviations for that. Within that, you could go directly into the RFO FAR Part 8. That RFO FAR Part 8 specifically references 53871 for Federal Supply Schedule ordering procedures. And then within that 53871, specifically, you're going to see a reference to the MAS website, which is the website we kind of showed earlier. So that's kind of how all of that flows. And again, that last bullet really intended to be supplementary, going through, illustrating how this works, best practices, scenarios, all those kinds of things. But what I want to say is, like, there's a lot changing, and we're doing a lot of work and trying to capture as much as we can. But what I will say is, let us know if anything in there is unclear. If you have questions about the RFO specifically, I encourage you to you can go to these links. You can go to acquisition.gov. You can comment directly to those RFO changes. And I know I forget the number. They spoke about it again at an event yesterday, but certainly that group is open to the feedback, and they have made changes and are planning changes based on that feedback. So I guess the other part of this is important to remember is this is not yet formal rulemaking. It's not yet a formal rewrite of the FAR. That's coming though, right? So the time is now to provide any feedback you might have to that group, to highlight any areas where you feel like we may need some more work. And the same stands for us. So what I'm saying on this, especially on the stuff that's on the website, we're super flexible in terms of how quickly we can address things or update things, things that aren't clear or things that we want to go further into. So Mass PMO, I think we have, yeah, here we go. So Mass PMO at gsa.gov, that remains the best way to get in contact with us, in particular for content on that Mass page. And please, yeah, whatever you're seeing, ideas you have, because there are flexibilities. We know there are more flexibilities, and there are more areas that we want to look into in terms of how we might be able to improve the Mass program based on these newfound flexibilities. So ideas you have, thoughts you have, feedback on the guidance, we welcome all of it and appreciate everyone's participation. Do we want to go, Matt or Dana, do we want to go to, do we have Q&A? I know we're going to pull the Q&A and probably give written responses to a lot of it. And I know there's probably a lot of good questions, but is there anything we want to handle now?
I don't think there's anything you want to handle now, but we will take back the questions. There were a lot of good questions. Submit it, and the Q&A will be posted as Matt stated earlier in the training.
Okay. One more thing, it just reminded me. We are OLM is, I'm guessing OLM may be some of the questions we got. But we know right now we are working with the Office of Policy Compliance, the Office Government-wide Policy. We're working on a list of OLM FAQs that's going to be published on gsa.gov/mass. So that's coming. And we can, again, very flexible in terms of new questions and being able to add to that. So the timing is good. Hopefully there may be things we can pull from the Q&A we got from this event to make sure we're covering a lot of that in the OLM FAQs. All right. Matt, do you want me to turn it back to you to close this out?